My mother abused me all throughout my childhood and ruined my chances at college. So I got my revenge by ruining her life. Growing up, my mom, Linda, wasn't exactly what you'd call nurturing. It's tough admitting this, but she was abusive. Not just in the physical slap across the face kind of way, but in every way that could mess a kid up. I'm not here to throw a pity party though, just want to share my side, you know? So it all started way back. As far back as I can remember, Linda had a temper that could ignite faster than gasoline. I was always walking on eggshells, trying not to set her off. But no matter how quiet or good I tried to be, it was like she had a sixth sense for finding something to get mad about. She'd yell for hours over the smallest things, like if I forgot to put a dish away or if I left a light on. And let me tell you, her screaming wasn't your ordinary shouting. It was this bone-chilling thing that made you feel about 2 inches tall. Sometimes, though, the yelling turned into hitting. I don't really like to go into details about that part, but yeah, it was as bad as you're probably guessing. Anyway, to cope with all that, I started pulling these petty little revenge stunts. Nothing harmful, but just enough to give me a sense of winning something back, you know? Like this one time I peed in her Lipton iced tea. Yeah, I know, gross, right? But when you're a kid with no control over anything, you find weird ways to push back. I also did this thing where I'd rub her forks and spoons between my butt cheeks before setting the table. Childish? Totally. Satisfying? More than I'd like to admit. And before you judge me, remember, this was a kid's version of fighting back against a pretty crappy situation. No pun intended. As I got older, the situation didn't get any better. If anything, it just got worse because I started understanding more about how wrong the whole thing was. By the time I hit middle school, I was full on resenting her and everything at home. It's like the air in our house was constantly thick with tension. You could cut it with a knife, and just sitting in the living room felt like sitting in a minefield waiting for the next explosion. She started kicking me out around then too. Told me to find somewhere else to live. Can you imagine that? Telling a 13-year-old to get lost? The first few times, I'd just wander around the neighborhood until she cooled off. But one day, she was so fed up, she actually sent me away to another country for a whole year and tried to hold on to my passport so I couldn't come back. That year abroad was crazy. I was staying with relatives who barely knew me, in a place where I didn't speak the language. Felt like I'd been dropped on another planet. Somehow, though, it was still better than being at home. At least there was no screaming, no hitting, just a lot of confusion and loneliness, which was a step up in some sad way. Getting back to the US was a whole adventure on its own. Mom didn't want me back, obviously, but my stepdad, Jack, wasn't about to let her send me away for good. He's always been more of a dad than my real dad ever was. So he pulled some strings, got in touch with the embassy, and helped me get back home. Home, as in the place, not the feeling, because by then, I didn't really have a place that felt like home anymore. I made it back right in time for senior year, but with no credits from the year before, my school was like, "Who are you even?" I had to bust my butt to catch up, staying late, coming in early, and even then, all I managed was to scrape enough credits to get a GED instead of a diploma. It sucked, watching my friends gear up for prom and graduation while I was just trying to make it through without falling apart. But I did make one good friend, Mark. He was one of those guys who everyone likes, you know? He had his own troubles, but always had a smile and a joke ready. We'd hang out after school, mostly at his place because mine was a no-go zone. His family was cool, treated me like I was one of their own. It was weird, but nice to see what a normal family looked like. Despite everything, I was determined to make something of myself. Linda had always said I'd amount to nothing, just like my dad, who I never really knew. But something about the way she said it made me want to prove her wrong. I started applying to colleges, thinking maybe if I could get a degree, I could get out for good. Linda, of course, laughed when I told her I was applying to colleges, said I was dreaming if I thought I could make it. But when I actually got accepted into a 2-year program with a chance to transfer to a university later, she changed her tune. Suddenly, she was all promises about how I could stay as long as I was in school. Stupidly, I believed her. That turned out to be a mistake. A big one. That's the setup anyway. It's a lot, I know, but that's where my story starts. From there, it gets even crazier. Senior year was supposed to be the big finale of high school, right? Prom, graduation, those sweet moments of triumph. Well, for me, it was more about survival and finding any scrap of normalcy I could. After scrambling back from a year abroad, thanks to my stepdad Jack, who's pretty much the MVP of this story, I landed smack in the middle of what should have been my victory lap at high school. Only it felt more like starting over. I was the kid who disappeared for a year, then popped back up with a weird accent and clothes that didn't quite fit the local trends anymore. First day back, and I'm already an outsider. Kids have cliques, right? Well, they don't just let you waltz back in after a year. especially when your mom's known as the local nut job. Thanks, Linda. So I'm trying to catch up academically because I'm way behind. Teachers were giving me the side eye, wondering if I was going to stick around or if I'd vanish again. I started staying after school, hitting the books hard. It was either that or go home to Linda's latest screaming saga, so you can bet I found religion in the religion of studying. About a month in, I get this idea in my head that maybe I could join the soccer team. I figured it'd be a good way to meet some people, blow off steam, and hey, maybe even add something fancy to my college apps. Coach gave me a shot, probably felt sorry for me or something. I wasn't great, but running around the field felt like freedom. Plus, it kept me out of the house even longer, which was the real win. Things at home were, well, predictable. Linda was on her usual terror streak, finding new and creative ways to make my life hell. If it wasn't the yelling, it was the guilt trips or the cold shoulders. But this time around, I had soccer practice to drown it out. It was like as soon as I hit that field, her voice just couldn't reach me. Halfway through the semester, though, things took a nosedive. Linda decided one night to throw one of her infamous fits right in the middle of a big term project I was working on. Papers flew, my laptop nearly got smashed, typical Linda chaos. But this time I snapped a bit, told her she couldn't keep doing this. Big mistake, she kicked me out, again. But this time it felt final. I grabbed my stuff and crashed at Mark's place. His parents were cool about it, didn't ask too many questions. Mark just clapped me on the shoulder and made up the couch. That couch became my new base camp. School was my only escape. I was pulling decent grades somehow. Teachers started noticing, giving me nods and small smiles like they were silently rooting for me. It felt good. Like maybe I wasn't just the freak show Linda had always said I was. Then, there was this one teacher, Mr. Thompson. Dude was like something out of a movie, you know? Tweed jacket, glasses, always a book in his hand. He taught English and somehow got me hooked on classic novels. Said I had a knack for writing, which blew my mind. Nobody had ever told me I was good at anything like that. Mr. Thompson started giving me extra books to read outside of class. We'd chat about them after school, sometimes during lunch. It was weird having an adult actually treat me like my thoughts mattered. He even suggested I could be a writer one day. That idea stuck with me, kind of like a little seed planted in the back of my mind. Prom came and went. I didn't go. Felt like too much of a reminder of everything I wasn't a part of. But graduation, that was non-negotiable. I was going to walk that stage, get my diploma, and prove Linda wrong. Graduation day was weirdly sunny, like the universe had decided to give me a break for once. I stood there in my gown, looking around at all the families hugging and taking pictures. Felt a bit like an outsider, but then Mark's family pulled me into a photo. "One of us," his mom joked, squeezing me tight. Walking across that stage, shaking the principal's hand, grabbing that diploma, it was surreal. Like I'd actually managed to pull something off despite everything. Mr. Thompson gave me a nod from the sidelines, and I swear, that meant more to me than any family cheer could have. Summer rolled around, and I had to figure out what was next. College was looming, but so was the reality of living on my own. No way was I going back to Linda's. I picked up a couple of jobs, landscaping by day, washing dishes by night. Saved every penny I could, slept on any couch that would have me. One night, lying on Mark's couch, staring at the ceiling, I thought about what Mr. Thompson said about writing. Maybe that was my way out. Not just out of Linda's shadow, but out of this whole mess. Maybe I could write my way into a new life. So I started scribbling down my thoughts, my stories, everything. Filled notebooks with words, most of it probably garbage, but it felt like I was building something. Like I was taking all the crap Linda had thrown at me and turning it into something of my own. That summer, I learned a lot about myself. Learned that I could survive, that I could make plans, and maybe, just maybe, I could write a future where I was in charge. No Linda, no chaos, just me and the words. And as fall edged closer, with the start of college on the horizon, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Weird, huh? After everything, still finding a spot for hope. But that's how it went down. Just a guy, a bunch of books, and a whole lot of determination to prove that I could be more than what Linda said I'd be. And who knows, maybe that's just the start of something big. Starting college was like stepping onto another planet. Not just because I was finally out of Linda's grip, but because everything was so different. I mean, here I was, a guy who barely managed to scrape through high school with a GED, walking into this big campus like I actually belonged there. The first few weeks were a blur of trying to find my classes, figuring out where the cheapest coffee was. Student budget, am I right? And just trying to blend in with a bunch of kids who seemed like they had it all figured out. Spoiler alert, they didn't, but it sure felt like it at the time. I'd landed a spot in a community college about 2 hours away from my hometown, far enough to feel like a fresh start, close enough that I could still crash on Mark's couch if things went south. The plan was to nail the first 2 semesters, then maybe transfer to a university. Big dreams considering my track record, but I was all in. Classes were a whole new ballgame. I'd picked a mix, some Gen EDS, a couple of potential majors I was toying with, but the real game changer was this intro to psychology class. The prof was this enthusiastic guy who could make even the driest topics seem like a mystery unraveling right before your eyes. I got hooked, fast. It was like he was explaining all the crazy I'd lived through, but with fancy terms and theories. And then there was Sarah. Met her in that psych class. She was this quiet girl, always scribbling notes like she was going to be quizzed on life itself. We got partnered up for a project, and I guess you could say we clicked. She had this way of listening that made you feel like what you were saying actually mattered. We started hanging out after class, sometimes grabbing that cheap coffee or hitting the library together. I was still working a couple of jobs, campus bookstore during the day, a local diner at nights. Sleep was like this luxury I couldn't afford, but I was managing. The hustle was real, but so was the motivation. I was determined not to screw this up. Not just for me, but for Mr. Thompson, for Mark, and maybe a little bit for Sarah, who somehow saw something in me. My grades were holding up, better than I'd expected. Turned out, college was a lot about just showing up, doing the work, and staying out of drama. A simple formula, but man, it worked. Halfway through the semester, I'm sitting with a solid B average, and it felt like maybe, just maybe, I could pull this whole college thing off. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Money was tight, really tight. There were nights I'd find myself counting out change just to make sure I could eat the next day. I remember one night, right before midterms, I had exactly $4 to my name. Bought a cup of noodles and a used textbook, dinner and a study guide all wrapped up in one. Sarah noticed, of course. She started dragging me to every campus event with free food she could find. "It's about resourcefulness," she'd say, dragging me to another lecture or meetup. I didn't mind. It was food, and it was with her. We'd sit there listening to some guest speaker, munching on whatever snacks were on offer, and it felt like being part of something normal, something right. As the end of the semester approached, I started feeling the pressure. Finals were looming and my funding was running on fumes. I picked up extra shifts at the diner, studied between orders, and lived off coffee and adrenaline. It was exhausting, but quitting wasn't an option. Then, one rainy night, everything nearly fell apart. I was biking back from the diner, dead tired, when a car came out of nowhere. Swerved to miss it and ended up eating pavement. Broke my wrist, trashed my bike, and there I was, lying in the rain wondering how I'd even finish the semester with a cast up to my elbow. So I had to go back to my mom's house, and that was a big mistake. She eventually told me that I would always have a place to live until I finished my collage. My first 2 semesters at a 2-year college, I maintained a 3.7 GPA. My teachers loved me, and it was my escape. Towards the end of my second semester during finals, I came home late one night around 10 p.m., and my mother yanked the door open, screaming in my face, asking when I'll move out. I'm slightly drunk and decide to ignore her and walk to my room completely. If I opened my mouth, that day would be the day I blew up and cast her out. I've rarely ever raised my voice at her because it never ended well. Now, at this point, I'm 19, and I've been doing school full-time with no savings. I get to my room. She rips my door open and starts yelling. I say nothing and stare at her. She walked away and called the police on me, saying she thought I'd murder her and my younger siblings. I don't know where the hell she got that idea from, and she's the one who's nearly killed me many times. I packed everything into a duffel bag and left 5 minutes afterwards. I failed all of my finals because I couldn't make it to my school. Things kind of spiraled, and the next 2 to 3 years were me on and off, homeless. I survived the best I could in a big city with no college degree, and made a lot of bad choices due to my bad habits. Eventually, I found a profitable hobby that gave me meaning. And through that, I started to work my way up. I got my own apartment, had a full-time job, and did my hobby on the side. I hadn't kept up contact with my mother at all, but my younger sister, who was old enough to have a phone, found me on social media. So I saw photos and such. She didn't have it anywhere near as bad as me, but she did get beaten occasionally. My mother reached out via email, all smiles, asking how I've been. I've always been envious of most people's relationship with their moms, so I gave her a chance and a call. We talked for a few minutes and everything was civil and seemed like things would go okay. But then she asked me what I've been up to the last few years, and I told her honestly that I had been homeless for a while and struggled a lot after what she did to me. But I worked my way out of it. She literally laughs. She laughed for a few seconds in a very condescending kind of chuckle and then said, I never did a thing to you, so you don't know what abuse is. It's your own damn fault you were homeless. So how about you? But by that point, I hung up. I was speechless and fuming. I don't know what abuse is. All right then. I've spent too damn long letting you destroy my sanity. Now is the time. There was a few things my mother didn't know. One, I knew for a fact that the current well-paying job she had was gone on lies, as she never got her college degree and lied about it on her resume. Two, I had access to all of her email accounts and cloud storage accounts since I was the one that set them up when I was younger, and she never changes her passwords. Lastly, she definitely wasn't aware that from 13 years old, and on to the last time she hit me, I took photos of all my bruises, marks, wounds, and bloody noses, saving them to my computer and then Google Drive. On top of that, my little sister had been sending me photos via social media of the bruises she got from my mom. The first thing I did was compile all of those photos and videos into one folder. I then reached out to CPS in my city and explained that my siblings were being abused, how I was abused in the past, and that I had mountains of proof. Since I've called the cops on my mother before, and the thing that happened with my older sister, there was immediately a home visit. They arrived almost a day later with the police, and coincidentally, my mother was literally in the process of beating my younger sister when they were knocking. Cue an emergency removal of all my siblings from the house and my mother getting arrested, though she was released hours later. I was getting a play-by-play of the events because my mother's best friend is a blabbermouth and everything my mother said, she told her son who related to me without either of their knowledge. I sent CPS all the evidence, and there's a legit case against my mother now. The next day I emailed and then called up her job to inform them that she had lied about having a very necessary college degree, as well as informed them of the current events in her life, which sparked a background check. She was fired days later by BI to a $75,000 salary and a blacklist, and the only industry you know how to work. I then spitefully deleted every cloud account and email address I ever made for her, which was all of them, which I'm sure will make keeping up with a lot of bills nearly impossible. I then anonymously reported her to the IRS because of the tax fraud she committed for years by claiming people's children that weren't hers, with a lot of detailed information, since I lived with her while she did it. So now my mother lost all her kids, and her job. I'm meeting with a caseworker from CPS next week to talk more about what happens moving forward, but I do know they're not going back. I don't know how she's going to pay her mortgage now and survive. I'm sure she's going to get a call from the IRS who will be looking for a few $1,000s she owes them. She also has to go back to court in a few months. Not exactly sure what she was charged with, but in the meantime, I swallowed my pride and moved into a homeless shelter in my city, specifically for people with jobs and savings. I'll be able to continue saving while I work on bettering myself as a person. I created an action plan and mapped out all my goals and how I want to achieve them. Up until recently, I wasn't even planning on being alive. Sorry if that's too dark. I honestly always had these thoughts wishing my mother would have finished the job with me and made life easier. But as of late, I'm becoming more and more curious about what I'm capable of if I give myself the chance. I've been able to visit my younger siblings and I've gotten to know my little sister a bit better because of the experience. I've also only drunk 3 times in the last 4 months compared to every other day in the past, which isn't great, but it's a change. My younger siblings are still with CPS, but I can't go into detail. My mother was supposed to go to a hearing to get them back, but things got complicated. My mother's best friend's son, who I've known for 8 years, does his best to relay all the crap my mother tells her while they talk on the phone all day. Things had gotten worse for her. She hasn't been keeping up with her mortgage payments. Her fiancé, my youngest sibling's dad, is no longer her fiancé anymore and is trying to file for custody. I heard she was a wreck and then went ghost, but it didn't make me feel better. There weren't supposed to be any winners. I initially just wanted to tell someone for once. But one thing changed my mind. Something I was not expecting. Months after I set this all in motion, a phone call from my mother in the past. Seeing her calls, even after moving out, would set me on edge. But that hasn't been the case lately. It was just another thing that happened, just another event. She always had my number but never reached out. Even when things first started going downhill, I doubt she even gave me a second thought. My mother is gone a few weeks after I set my plan into motion. The state I'm in brought felony charges up against her. She left the country shortly after and went to her home country in South America. I have no idea how she was even allowed to leave. But they didn't take her passport. She avoided specifics on that part. She mentioned staying with a family friend temporarily and tried to frame it as a short vacation. She didn't even start off with a hello. She started the conversation by ordering me to go somewhere quiet, before launching into a sob story about how things have been going for her. This is after months of no contact. after laughing at me for being homeless and denying she ever abused me months ago, just yammering away like it was nothing. But I let her talk. It was surreal. I felt so cold just listening to her talk. It was like talking to a stranger. She mentions losing out on so much money and how she doesn't know how it all happened. And then finally, she brings up the topic of me and my siblings. She brought up my little sister and the night of the emergency removal. She starts complaining about how she misses my little sister and brothers. She says that it's going to mess up tax season. And then she had the audacity to start trying to convince me that I should go talk to the caseworkers for her to back up her claim that she never abused them or me. And I should know that she said that to me after everything of all people. 9 minutes into the conversation and like nothing ever happened. But it wasn't anything new. Of course I cut her off, but at that point my mind was already made up. I asked her if she remembered when I used to make iced tea for her all those years. She was a little thrown off, but said yes. I paused for a few seconds before slowly telling her in detail about all the ways I sabotaged her Lipton iced tea. She tried to interrupt me once, but I didn't stop talking. I told her about how I'd always put too much sugar and she'd never taste it and keep drinking more, which was why I always insisted there was just silence on the phone. But I know she was listening. I told her to wait until after dinner when I got home from school to shower so I could rub her spoons between my butt cheeks for maximum damage, and how I'd mix it into her food to mask it. At this point, I'm not even sure she's listening anymore, but I'm still describing specific days. I remember doing it that I know she would remember. She finally loudly interrupts me, screaming at me disgusting evil things. She cursed me the way she used to back in the days when she was standing over me with an extension cord, beating the skin off of me when I was younger. She's blaming me for ruining her life and how she wishes she had a better child, all without knowing that I directly caused the destruction of her current life. Though she's speaking about the past, I just let her waste her breath. She couldn't touch me or my siblings. It only lasted a few seconds. Now I remember spending years daydreaming. Of all things, I'd say to my mother if I had the chance. But I just bottled it up with all my other baggage and kept trying to exist. When she finally shut her mouth, I calmly told her, "Look, Mom, you don't know what abuse is. And honestly, it's your own damn fault. This is all happening to you. Also, my bad for pissing in your iced tea." Then I just hung up the phone and blocked her number. That was the last day I drank. I haven't talked to her since. I'm not sure she's aware. Or maybe she is. How bad of an idea it was to leave the country with all this going down, even if it was for a few weeks. At this point, I'm done with her. I don't want an apology. I just want to move forward and be a better person. I know that's hard to believe after everything I just told you, but it's the truth. I try my best to put as much positivity into the world and share it with the people around me as much as possible. But screw her. I don't know if she knows it was me, but I didn't tell her. I'm sure she can guess, though, if she really tried. Anyways, that's my revenge. It's still actively screwing her life up, but I'm not taking any active part in it. I wish it weren't like this. I wish I had a real family that loved me, and I knew how to love back the right way. I wish I had a real relationship with my mother, and none of those things happened. I wish I could have turned out like one of the happy people in the world, but I can spend all day wishing. But none of it could change. So I have to accept what happened and go on with my life. My sister cheated with my fiancé on engagement day and my family supported her. So, I'm 28 now, and not too long ago, my dad, Frank, calls me out of nowhere. We haven't spoken in like 6 years. Yeah, it's been that long. Honestly, I didn't think I'd ever hear from him again. But when I picked up, he sounded pretty desperate. And I mean desperate, desperate. The kind of voice you use when you're in deep trouble and don't know who else to call. Now here's the thing. I wasn't ready for what he was about to drop on me. He goes on to tell me that my younger sister Lisa and her husband Brad are in some serious financial crisis. Apparently, they've dug themselves into this huge hole, and now they're looking for someone to pull them out of it. And guess who he thinks should help? Yeah, me. The same sister who betrayed me years ago, and the same guy who was supposed to be my fiancé. Before I get into all the recent drama, let me rewind a bit so you get the full picture. This crap storm didn't just pop out of nowhere. See, Lisa's 26 now, and we've never been super close, like, we weren't at each other's throats or anything growing up, but we were just kind of distant. She was always a little sneaky, always looking for a way to get ahead, but I never thought she'd go as far as stabbing me in the back the way she did. I guess I should have seen the signs sooner, but hindsight, right? Brad, the guy I was going to marry, was everything I thought I wanted. We met in college. Typical stuff, you know? We were together for 5 years. 5 freaking years. That's a long time to be with someone. And by that point, I thought we were solid. He proposed, and I was over the moon, like I was sure I'd found my person. We planned this whole engagement party, and it was supposed to be the happiest night of my life. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Now here's where it all goes to hell. That night, everyone's celebrating, laughing, drinking, all that good stuff. I remember feeling like the luckiest person in the world. I mean, how often do you get a night like that where everything just feels right? Well, apparently not as often as you think. Around 10 p.m., I stepped outside to take a call, right? I needed better reception, so I wandered out to the backyard. It's dark, but the string lights were still on, and I'm walking around trying to get some signal when I see them. Lisa and Brad, together. Not just together, but, like, really together. Kissing. Like they didn't give a damn who saw. It's funny, because for a second I just stood there, frozen. My brain couldn't catch up to what my eyes were seeing, like, this couldn't be real, right? I mean, who does that? And on the night of your freaking engagement party, it felt like time just stopped. They didn't notice me at first, which was wild. I was standing there just a few feet away, and they were so into it, they didn't even know I was watching. When they finally saw me, their faces dropped. They stopped kissing, obviously, but it was way too late. I didn't say anything. I just turned around and bolted. I don't know how I made it to my car without completely breaking down, but I did. I sped off to the nearest hotel, checked in, and just collapsed on the bed. I couldn't even cry at first. It was like my body was too stunned to react. I kept telling myself it wasn't real, that there had to be some kind of explanation, but deep down, I knew what I saw was exactly what it looked like. Lisa and Brad were screwing behind my back. I was just lying there, staring at the ceiling, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lisa. I almost didn't want to look, but curiosity got the better of me. She said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for you to find out like that. I'm in love with Brad. We've been seeing each other for a while." I don't know why, but reading it somehow hurt worse than seeing it. Like, there was something about seeing those words written out that made it feel so much more final. She went on to say how she didn't mean to hurt me, but she couldn't help how she felt and blah, blah, blah. Honestly, at that moment, I wasn't even mad. I was just numb. Too numb to feel anything. I couldn't process it yet. Then Brad texted me. He said he was sorry too, but then he added that he had proposed to me because he thought it would make his feelings for Lisa go away. Like, what kind of twisted logic is that? He thought marrying me would somehow help him stop thinking about her. It made me feel like I was just a placeholder. Like he was just using me until he figured out how to be with Lisa. That was the moment where everything really hit me, how badly I'd been played. I stayed in that hotel for like 3 days, not talking to anyone, just trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. When I finally went back home to get my stuff, I wasn't prepared for what I walked into. I thought the house would be empty. Instead, everyone was there. My dad, my stepmom, and Lisa. Even Brad was there. It was like they were all waiting for me. Now, normally when you've just been royally screwed over, you'd expect some sort of apology, right? But no. The second I walked in, they all acted like nothing happened. Lisa came up to me with tears in her eyes and hugged me like I was supposed to feel sorry for her. Brad stood in the back, looking awkward as hell, but no one said anything. No one apologized. I told them I was just there to pack my things and leave. That's when Brad spoke up, saying he was moving in with Lisa now that everything was out in the open. My dad and stepmom didn't seem fazed. In fact, they looked happy. My own family was happy that my sister had stolen my fiancé and that I was out of the picture. I asked them straight up why they were smiling. Like, what the hell was so funny? My dad, of all people, had the nerve to tell me that we can't change what happened and that it was better to just accept it and move on. Move on? Really? My sister stole my life and I'm just supposed to be okay with it? I felt like I was in some twisted nightmare where everyone around me was insane, and I was the only one seeing how messed up it was. Lisa apologized in her half-assed way, saying she couldn't help falling in love with Brad, and they were meant to be together. I was so done. I packed up my stuff, told them all to go to hell, and walked out of that house for the last time. All right, so after I packed my stuff and left my family behind, I decided to cut them all off completely. It wasn't some dramatic decision. It was more like, I'm done. I'm not dealing with this anymore. I changed my number, blocked them on everything, texts, social media, all of it. I didn't want any more fake apologies or awkward messages from Lisa or Brad or, honestly, anyone else in my family. For the next few months, I felt like I could finally breathe. I wasn't waking up every day wondering if I was going to get hit with some new drama or have to deal with the fact that my own family picked my sister over me. I focused on work, built up some savings, got a new apartment, and just moved on. And honestly, life was good. No, scratch that, life was great. I didn't have to think about them. They weren't a part of my world anymore. But of course, things can't stay peaceful forever, right? So 5 years later, 5 years of total silence from my family, I get this phone call. It's from a number I don't recognize, and at first I think, no way I'm answering this. But for some reason, I pick up, and guess who's on the other line? My dad, Frank. I don't even know how he got my number. Must have pulled some serious detective work to get it because I made sure they couldn't find me. I think about hanging up right there, but something in his voice makes me pause. He sounds, well, not like the strong, authoritative dad I remember. He sounds beaten down, like he's at the end of his rope. I stay on the line just to hear what he's got to say, and that's when he drops the big one on me. Turns out, Lisa and Brad, yeah, the golden couple who everyone defended back then, are in deep trouble. They're flat broke. Apparently, they started this business a few years ago trying to be entrepreneurs or whatever. You know, selling stuff online or some nonsense. Anyway, the whole thing tanked. Their investors pulled out, they're swimming in debt, and now they've sold almost everything they own. According to Dad, they're basically one step away from being homeless. Here's the kicker. Wait, I'm not supposed to say that. Dad's calling me because they need money. Yeah, you heard that right. After everything that happened, after all the betrayal and drama, they want me to bail them out. At first, I'm just sitting there, stunned. I can't believe what I'm hearing. My family hasn't talked to me in years, not since the day I walked out. And now, out of nowhere, they're asking for $75,000. $75,000? Like, where do they think I'm getting that kind of money? Do they think I've just been sitting around hoarding cash all these years? It's absolutely insane. I ask Dad straight up, why are you coming to me for this? Why don't they ask their friends or someone else in the family? And that's when he tells me that they've already tried. Apparently, everyone else is either tapped out or not willing to drain their savings to help. Even Brad's family, who always had their back, won't touch this mess. So naturally, they figured, hey, let's call the person we screwed over and ask her to save us. What's even crazier is that Lisa and Brad didn't want Dad to call me. According to him, Lisa was too embarrassed to ask me directly. They thought I'd never agree, which, spoiler alert, they were 100% right about. But Dad, being Dad, figured it was worth a shot anyway. He tried to guilt trip me, saying stuff like, they've learned their lesson, and they're family after all. I gotta admit, part of me wanted to laugh. Like, really? Now they're family? When it suits them, huh? When they need me, suddenly I'm important again. I told Dad I wasn't interested, that there was no way I was giving them that kind of money. I mean, I had to scrape and claw my way up after they all abandoned me. There was no way I was about to just hand over everything I'd worked for. Dad wasn't happy with that answer. He started getting all emotional, saying how Lisa and Brad were at rock bottom, and if I didn't help, things were going to get really bad for them. He said they'd lose their house, their business was already gone, and they were even struggling to put food on the table. But here's the thing. None of that moved me. I didn't feel sorry for them. It's like, you made your bed, now lie in it. You think you can betray someone, wreck their life, and then, years later, expect them to just swoop in and save you? Nope, not happening. I told Dad again that I wasn't helping, and that's when he lost it. He starts calling me selfish, saying I've become cruel and bitter, and that I'm letting my grudge tear the family apart. It was wild. Like, I'm the one tearing the family apart? After everything they did? I told him straight up that I wasn't going to be guilted into anything. I wasn't going to feel bad for protecting myself after the way they all treated me. I reminded him how everyone had taken Lisa's side, how they all stood by while she destroyed my engagement and stole my future. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end, but he didn't say anything. The call ended with him just kind of muttering, I hope you don't regret this, and then hanging up. It felt like such a weak threat, like he was still trying to make me feel like I was in the wrong. But here's the thing. After I hung up, I didn't feel any guilt. I felt relief, like this was the final nail in the coffin. I knew for sure that I didn't need these people in my life anymore, and if they were struggling now, that was on them. Over the next few days, I started getting these guilt-ridden text messages from Dad. I'm talking non-stop. He was blowing up my phone with messages like, you're still my daughter, I know you'll do the right thing, and Lisa made mistakes, but we all have. It was like he was trying every angle to get me to cave. I even got a few from my stepmom, Julie, telling me how heartbroken she was and how she couldn't believe I was acting like this. I didn't respond to any of them. I just blocked their numbers. I had already made my decision, and no amount of guilt or manipulation was going to change that. They made their choices, and now they were dealing with the consequences. Honestly, cutting them off again was probably the best thing I could have done. It gave me peace, knowing I wasn't going to be dragged into their mess anymore. Let them figure it out. They made their bed. Now they can deal with it. A few days after I blocked my dad and stepmom, Things finally felt like they were settling down again. I'd managed to push the whole ridiculous situation to the back of my mind. You know, I was focusing on work, hanging out with friends, getting back to my normal routine. I wasn't about to let their drama mess up my life again. But of course, just when you think things are quiet, that's when the chaos sneaks up on you. It was a Saturday, and I remember it so clearly because I'd just gotten back from grocery shopping and was looking forward to a chill afternoon. I had some music playing, was about to make lunch, and then my phone started buzzing. At first, I thought it might be one of those spam calls, so I ignored it. But then it buzzed again. This time, it was a text from my neighbor. Now, my neighbor, Sarah, is a sweet lady in her 60s who's lived next to me for years. We're not super close, but she's the kind of person who will bring you cookies around the holidays and tell you when your package gets left on her porch by mistake. So when I see her name pop up, I figured it must be something small. Maybe she needed help moving a plant or something. But her message was weird. It just said, "Are you home? There's a couple outside your house. They've been knocking and yelling for a while. I'm not sure if you know them, but it's starting to make me nervous." My stomach dropped immediately. I had a pretty good idea of who it was before I even looked out the window. Sure enough, when I peeked out, there they were. Lisa and Brad, standing on my front porch looking all kinds of pissed off. Lisa was pacing back and forth, and Brad was leaning against the door like he had nowhere better to be. I had this moment where I just froze. Part of me wanted to march out there and tell them to leave, but another part of me was like, hell no, I'm not getting involved with this. My first instinct was to call the police. I mean, they were on my property, causing a scene. But before I could even dial, Brad noticed me looking through the window. Great. Now that they knew I was home, I couldn't pretend I wasn't. Lisa started banging on the door harder, yelling, "We just want to talk!" Brad didn't say anything, but he was staring at me like I owed him something. The audacity of it made me sick to my stomach. I opened the door just a crack, enough to talk but not enough for them to push their way in. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice as calm as possible. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing how pissed I was. Lisa jumped in first, saying how I'd been ignoring everyone, and they needed to talk to me. She was practically shouting at this point, all worked up like she was the one who had been wronged. "You blocked us on everything. You didn't even let us explain," she said, her face red and frustrated. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Explain? Explain what exactly? How they'd both betrayed me, and then expected me to just hand over money when they messed up their own lives? "I don't need to hear your explanations," I said, keeping the door between us like a barrier. "I already know everything I need to know." Brad, who'd been quiet until now, suddenly chimed in. "We're family, all right? You can't just cut us out and act like we don't exist. We didn't come here to fight. We just need your help." I could feel my blood boiling. The nerve of this guy. He was the reason my life got flipped upside down in the first place, and now he was standing on my porch, talking about how I couldn't cut them off? What kind of reality were these people living in? "I can cut you off, and I did," I snapped. "Whatever you're here for, I'm not interested." But Lisa wouldn't let it go. She stepped forward like she was going to push her way in, and I instinctively pushed the door a little more closed. "It's not about what you want," she said, voice all high-pitched and desperate. "We need your help. You don't get it. We're in serious trouble. If you don't help us, we could lose everything." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a second I almost felt sorry for her. She looked worn out, like someone who hadn't slept in days. But then I remembered why they were here, why I was even in this position, and any sympathy I felt vanished. "That's not my problem," I said firmly. "You made your choices, and now you're dealing with the consequences. I don't owe you anything." Lisa's face twisted into this mix of anger and disbelief. She looked like she was about to cry, but it wasn't the kind of tears you feel bad for. It was more like frustration tears, like she couldn't believe I wasn't giving her what she wanted. Brad, on the other hand, wasn't crying. No, he was mad. He stepped forward, and I could see his fists clenching. "You don't get it, do you?" he said, his voice low and almost threatening. "We're not leaving until you agree to help us." At that point, I was done. I didn't care what they needed or why they were here. They were on my property, trying to intimidate me into giving them money. It wasn't just desperate, it was insane. "Get off my porch," I said, my voice shaking a little, but I was trying to stay strong. "You're not getting a penny from me. If you don't leave, I'm calling the cops." That seemed to get their attention. Lisa's eyes widened, and Brad took a step back, like he was actually considering what I'd said. But then Lisa started again, her voice rising in desperation. "You wouldn't call the police on your own family. We're family. You can't do this." I'd heard enough. Without another word, I slammed the door shut and locked it. My heart was racing, and I could feel my hands shaking, but I wasn't going to back down. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. As I was on the phone with the dispatcher, I could still hear Lisa yelling outside, but I ignored it. The police showed up about 15 minutes later, and by then, Lisa and Brad were sitting on the steps of my porch like they were waiting for me to change my mind. When the officers arrived, I opened the door just enough to explain what was happening. They asked Lisa and Brad to leave, but Lisa tried to play the victim, saying how I was abandoning my family and refusing to help in a time of need. The officers weren't buying it. They told them both to leave, and finally, after what felt like hours, they did. But not before Lisa threw one last look over her shoulder, like she was still hoping I'd change my mind. Spoiler, I didn't. A couple days passed after Brad and Lisa showed up at my house, and I thought that was the end of it. I mean, I kicked them out, right? There's no way they'd come back after that. But I should have known better. They weren't the type to just give up. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I was getting ready to head out when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't check it, but something told me to. I glanced down and saw it was a message from my dad. And this message, it was different. It wasn't like the others, where he was begging me to help or guilting me about family. This one was short, just 3 words. We need to talk. My gut reaction was to ignore it, but something about the way he phrased it, so blunt and to the point, made me uneasy. I decided to call him back just to see what he had to say. If it was more guilt trips, I'd hang up immediately. He picked up on the first ring. "I'm glad you called," he said, his voice low, almost serious. I didn't like it. "We've made a decision." That threw me off. "What do you mean?" Dad sighed, and there was this long pause before he spoke again. "Lisa and Brad, they're out of options. They've lost everything. Julie and I can't help them anymore, and if you don't step in, they're going to have nothing." I was quiet, waiting for the catch, because there was always a catch. He continued, "Julie and I have been talking, and we don't want to pressure you, but we need to know if you're going to help them or not. Because if you're not, we're going to have to cut ties with you." I blinked, not sure I heard him right. "Wait, what?" "You heard me," he said. "We can't keep this up anymore. If you're not going to help, then we have no choice but to stop talking to you." For a second, I just stood there, stunned. Was he seriously giving me an ultimatum? Help the people who betrayed me, or lose my family for good? It was insane. I couldn't believe it. "You've got to be kidding," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "You're seriously choosing them over me? Again?" "It's not like that," Dad tried to explain. "It's just, they need help. And we can't keep watching them fall apart. We have to stand by them." "And screw me, right? Just like before?" I snapped. "You expect me to bail them out after everything they've done? And now you're threatening to cut me off if I don't?" There was another long pause, and for a moment I thought he might backtrack. But then he said quietly, "I'm sorry, but yes." That was it. The final straw. I hung up without another word. I couldn't believe what had just happened, but one thing was clear. I wasn't backing down. They could cut me off if they wanted to, but I wasn't going to be blackmailed into helping the people who destroyed my life. And as far as I was concerned, I had just lost my family all over again. So, after that last phone call with my dad, I figured I'd hit rock bottom with this whole situation. I mean, how much worse could it get, right? My own father gave me an ultimatum: help my sister and Brad, or be cut off from the family for good. And honestly, I was pretty sure I'd made my peace with it. If that's how they wanted to play things, fine. I wasn't going to beg them to stay in my life. I had done that once, years ago, and I wasn't about to do it again. But of course, I should have known it wasn't over. A few days after that conversation, I was at home, trying to just focus on work, forget about the drama, and move on. It had been quiet for a little bit, which I thought was a good sign. No frantic texts, no surprise visits, just me getting back to normal. But deep down, I knew something was coming. And sure enough, it did. It was around 7 p.m. on a Saturday when the doorbell rang. My heart sank immediately because, well, who else would it be? I wasn't expecting anyone, and nobody just shows up at my place unannounced, not unless they're looking for trouble. I walked to the door, already feeling that mix of dread and annoyance building up inside me. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. There they were. Dad, Julie, Lisa, and Brad. All 4 of them standing there like they were about to stage some kind of intervention. Lisa looked like she'd been crying. Her makeup was all smudged. Brad was doing his usual pacing thing, looking pissed off and stressed out. Dad and Julie stood a little back, like they were waiting for me to invite them in. I didn't. Instead, I just stood in the doorway, crossing my arms, trying to stay calm. What do you want? I asked, my voice flat. We need to talk, Dad said, his tone serious, almost like this was some official business meeting or something. I sighed. We've already talked. You gave me your ultimatum. I'm not helping them, and I'm not changing my mind. Dad looked at Lisa, who stepped forward, her eyes red and puffy. Please, just hear us out, she said, her voice cracking. I know we messed up. I know we hurt you, but this is serious. We're about to lose everything. There it was again. The guilt, the pressure, the same crap they'd been throwing at me for weeks now. But I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. And that's my problem. How? I asked, not moving an inch from the door. You made your choices. You both did. Now you have to live with them. Lisa started crying again, but I wasn't feeling sorry for her. I couldn't. Not after everything. Brad finally stopped pacing long enough to jump in. Look, I know you think we're just trying to use you, he said, his voice a little calmer now. But this isn't about that. We're desperate. We don't have anyone else to turn to. Yeah, and whose fault is that? I shot back. You burned every bridge you had. That seemed to hit a nerve because Brad's face twisted into this angry scowl. But before he could blow up, my dad stepped forward, holding up his hands like he was trying to calm everyone down. Enough, Dad said, his voice firm. Let's not get into another argument. We came here to make peace. I actually laughed at that. Make peace? Really? After they tried to blackmail me into giving them money? After they basically disowned me? You want peace? I said, shaking my head. Then you should have thought about that before you all turned your backs on me. Julie, who had been quiet this whole time, finally spoke up. We made a mistake, she said, her voice soft. But this is family, and family helps each other when things go wrong. No, I said, my voice cold now. Family doesn't betray each other. Family doesn't pick sides and leave one person behind just because it's convenient. You all chose Lisa and Brad. You made that decision years ago, and now you're dealing with the consequences. So don't come to me talking about family. There was a long pause. I could tell they weren't expecting me to stand my ground like this. I think they thought if they all showed up together, looking pitiful, I'd cave. But that wasn't going to happen. I'm not giving you money, I said, my voice steady. Not now, not ever. Dad's face tightened. So that's it? You're really going to turn your back on us? Turn my back on you? I couldn't believe he actually said that. You turned your back on me, and now you want me to pretend like that never happened because you're in trouble? That's not how this works. I'm done. I've been done for years. Lisa stepped forward again, her voice desperate. Please, I'm begging you. We're going to lose our house. We don't have anywhere else to go. I looked her dead in the eyes. I don't care. And I didn't. I really didn't. That part of me, the part that used to care about what they thought about making things right, was gone. It had died the night I saw Lisa and Brad together in that backyard. And nothing they said or did now was going to change that. Brad's anger finally boiled over. He stepped up, practically in my face. You're really just going to stand there and let us lose everything? You think you're better than us because you have money now? I didn't even flinch. No, I said calmly. I think I'm smarter than you because I didn't throw my life away chasing something that was never mine to begin with. He looked like he was about to blow a gasket, but Dad stepped in between us, pushing him back. That's enough, Dad said, his voice low and threatening. We're leaving. Yeah, I said, holding the door open wider. You are. They all stared at me for a moment, like they were waiting for me to change my mind. Like maybe, at the last second, I'd say, okay, fine, I'll help. But I didn't. I stood my ground, and after what felt like an eternity, they turned and walked away. As they left, I felt this overwhelming sense of relief. Like a weight had finally been lifted off my chest. For the first time in years, I felt free. They could cut me off if they wanted to. They could play the victim and act like I was the bad guy. But I didn't care anymore. I had my life, and they had theirs, and that was all that mattered. When I closed the door behind me, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't looking back.